Labyrinth of Refrain: Coven of Dusk is the 2018 port of the previously Japan-only first-person dungeon crawler known as Coven and the Labyrinth of Refrain. Initially developed for the PlayStation Vita in 2016, then upgraded and ported to PS4 in 2017, it's releasing in North America and Europe on PS4, Nintendo Switch, and PC in September of this year. I tried the game on both the Nintendo Switch and the PlayStation 4, and though they function and look nearly identical, it was the PS4 I completed my playthrough on, and the version you'll see in the footage today. Before we start, I'll warn you, this review is going to be quite in-depth with the mechanics. This is not an easy game to fully understand, and it won't be too easy to fully convey either. There's going to be a lot of terms getting thrown around, and it might be hard to keep up with. But if you're a fan of first-person dungeon crawlers, if you're a fan of the art style from Disgaea or the narrative tone from Witch and the Hundred Knight, you owe it to yourself to see this review through to the end. But before we get too deep into that, let's start with the story. In a world known as Tanis, there exists a town known as Refrain. In the middle of this town, there exists a well. Beneath this well, there exists a mysterious labyrinth. This labyrinth is the Labyrinth of Refrain. It's believed that at the bottom of this well is a slumbering demon king with the power to end the world. It's also believed that within this well, through the use of the proper artifacts, one can summon an ultimate power capable of granting their every wish. As such, the well has garnered a fair bit of attention from the public over the years, and many daring adventurers risk it all to make it through. However, the Demon King, the wishes, these are only rumor, as all those who attempt to explore the labyrinth have met with an unfortunate fate, all except for one of them, a survivor who upon return wrote a magical book known as the Tractatus Demonstrum. Nothing much else is known about this survivor, however, and the Tractatus Demonstrum is the only evidence that he may have ever existed at all. This book is currently in the possession of our main character, Dusk Witch Dronia, and her young companion Luca. Dronia and Luca are just arriving in Refrain as the story begins, with intent on exploring the well. Only very little is given as to their motivation for exploring it. For the front half of the game, you will set up a base in Refrain and keep exploring the well deeper and deeper as you meet new characters in the town and get caught up in various antics, usually centered around an offbeat sort of comedy. Though the story is incredibly light at first, our main characters have enough chemistry to carry you along until it picks up, and the occasional use of a copious amount of potatoes is sure to keep your attention drawn.
I'll even show you my potatoes.
Dronia is a rather cold, hardworking, uptight woman who claims to hate children. Her child companion Luca is treated like a slave by her. Though Luca stays happy-go-lucky, innocent, and caring, this dynamic leads to a lot of funny moments and also a lot of really sad and pitiful ones.
A ring? Did Tracti find this? A cheap glass bead. You think I don't know trash when I see it? This is worthless junk.
It can be hard to get behind these characters at first, as Dronia often indulges in things that makes her anything but a good person. The tone of this game feels almost one-to-one like Witch and the Hundred Knight, and though that tone doesn't work for everyone, it can definitely be a refreshing change of pace from the typical game. Around the 40-hour mark, we shift from exploring the mysteries of the labyrinth and instead explore the mysteries of the Tractatus Demonstrum and our main characters, their histories and motivations, and how everything might be more related than we previously realized. Many of our characters have quite the tragic past, and it becomes difficult not to get emotionally invested and feel sympathetic for even the meanest of characters as we peel away at the parts of their identities that were previously hidden from us, and it's revealed to us just why they are the way they are. Although the plot development is slow at first, it was worth sticking through to the 40-hour mark where everything picked up and unfolded at a much faster pace. The game gets very serious and very dark, and takes a lot of interesting turns that will be sure to surprise and inspire. The base game runs about 68 hours, with a rather lengthy post-game as well that adds new bosses and a new dungeon. Before you hit the 68-hour mark, you will hit some credit sequences, but take these the same way you would if it was a Yoko Taro game. Most credit sequences aren't the actual end of the game, so load back up afterwards and keep going. I find it hard to say anything more about the story than what I have, as it would spoil some of the best reasons to play through the game. Although it doesn't give you a lot to work with at first, the game builds up to a really heavy character-driven story that is definitely worth the investment. With that out of the way, let's get into the really complicated stuff. Battle mechanics in this game are a little on the insane side, though most of your strategizing will be done before you actually enter battle or even leave the central hub. So let's talk about how that works. First things first, the Labyrinth of Refrain is filled with a deadly miasma that makes it impossible for normal humans to explore, so you won't be going down with Dronia and Luca. As such, you will be sending down puppet soldiers summoned through the Tractatus Demonstrum to do your exploring for you. Each and every puppet soldier in this game is crafted manually. First, you must salvage a soul, which can typically be extracted from items found within the labyrinth. Then you must put it into a wooden puppet's body, which can be salvaged or purchased at the game's store. Once the soul has a body, you must select what class the new character is going to be. There's initially 6 classes with 2 genders each, and each gender has 3 designs, so the game gives you a lot to work with, and you will unlock even more designs and classes later, as well as a 3rd gender. Once you decide on a class, gender, and design, you must give your puppet soldier a name and a nickname, followed by your choice of their voice. Then you select their equipment compatibility, their stat scaling balance, a battle stance which further affects character stats, followed finally by your choice of 1 bonus skill, a lucky number, and your character's flavor text. It's worth noting that you can allow the game to auto-generate all of this for you, however you'll likely want to build them yourself, as party building is 90% of this game's strategy. This whole system reminded me a lot of building a character for Dungeons & Dragons, and I actually enjoyed the process quite a bit. And it's good that I did, as you'll see soon, you're going to be doing a lot of this. When new characters are created, they come with default gear, but if you have anything better, it's recommended to swap it out immediately, as gear often affects more than your base character stats and level do on their own. In the equipment menu, you can see each character's weapon proficiencies, and though you can equip any kind of weapon to any character, it's worth sticking with what they know. When your new character is created, you must assign them to a coven. What's a coven, you ask? Well, when you go into a labyrinth, you send a whole brigade, and a brigade is made up of 5 covens. The 5 covens are groups of soldiers, and they come in various different forms and house various different amounts of units. At max, a coven can hold 8 people, 3 on the front line and 5 in support. With 5 covens of 8 people each, you will essentially be bringing 40 people into battle with you, though only 15 of them at a time will be direct attackers. To build a competent team, you will need to put a lot of focus into the 40 or more people you create and where you place them in a coven. The coven you assign a character to will affect a lot of things. For starters, the covens decide 100% what donums you can use. In this game, a donum is just a special attack, whether it be physical or magical. But if you look deeper, you will see there's a lot more going on here than just donum choice. Each slot you can put a character into in a coven has its own effect, requirement, and experience gain system. Some slots may allow only women or only astronites be equipped to them. Some slots may lower or raise your defense, or the defense of somebody else slotted in that same coven. Some slots in a coven may get 0 or 25% experience, where others in the same coven will receive 100 or 150% experience. So not only do you have to build and equip your characters with a purpose, but you must choose well where to slot up to 40 of them to maximize your battle capabilities. Covens can't just be used willy-nilly either. Each coven costs a certain amount of reinforcement points to use. By default, you have 100 reinforcement points, but every time you leave from the central hub to go to the labyrinth, the cost of your covens is subtracted from this amount, and what you have left over is what you have to explore and battle with. Reinforcement points are useful for a lot of things, more than just the cost of your coven. They can be exchanged to use field skills like your mud exits, which allow you to leave a dungeon from anywhere, your ability to break down destructible walls, fog walls which stop enemies from detecting you and prevent poison panels from hurting you, among many other things. Reinforcement points can also be used in battle to raise offense or defense abilities for single turns. And if you want to use items, change weapons, or move characters around within your coven, that will also come at a cost of 1 reinforcement point. Given how useful and often imperative these abilities are, you'll want to keep your coven cost as low as possible so you can journey for longer. Thankfully, the more you use a coven, the more the coven will level up, and the less it will cost to use. The more people fight in a coven together, the more they raise their rapport. Your rapport is a social link of sorts. The higher it is, the more you'll get resonance and echo bonuses during battle, which boost different types of attacks. There is a system that works inverse to your rapport, however, and this is known as karma. The more enemies you kill in a dungeon, or the more violent ways you find to solve problems that don't require violence, the more your karma will go up. When your karma goes up, that's a bad thing. The more karma you have, the more the enemies are likely to get gore attacks and critical hits on you. When you're gored by an enemy, you will permanently lose the use of a limb, which, similar to Vagrant's story, will come at a cost based on the limb you've lost. If you've lost your head, you're out for good until you can repair at the central hub. Otherwise, you'll be dealing with reduced max HP until you can get repaired. Looking at the battle screen now, we've covered most things here. Attack is, as you'd expect, your standard weapon-based attack. Donum is your Coven-dependent special attacks that require Donum points to cast. Fortify Coven we haven't covered, but it basically works as a group defend. Formation? That's another bag of worms. You can see here that characters can be placed on the vanguard or the rear guard. Front and back lines in layman terms. Depending on the pattern you have them shifted into, these will bring about different buffs, debuffs, and special abilities. Some Donum will even require you to have certain characters in certain Coven slots and be in a specific battle formation to use. When in battle, you have to choose all of your character moves at once, and then they play out based on speed afterward. While I personally prefer a more traditional approach to turn order, this definitely added some stress on the strategy of this game, as you had to be confident in your choices and build at all times. There's not much saving yourself after a bad move in this game. If you make one bad move, it's a bad move for the whole party. The level cap in this game is 99, however you can resurrect a puppet's soul into a new ascended body, which allows them to keep their old skills, but start at level 1 again, with low stats and a higher rate of stat scaling. There is no shortage of things to consider during and before battle in this game. But for the most part, you'll find that during normal battles, you really don't have to think that much about it. Boss battles, on the other hand, that's a totally different story. To my surprise, Labyrinth of Refrain was simultaneously one of the easiest and hardest first-person dungeon crawlers I've played to date. There is a huge discrepancy between enemy and boss difficulty in this game. For the first 20 hours, everything felt almost absurdly easy to me, though at the 20-hour mark, the difficulty really began to pinch every time I came across bosses. For the most part, standard battles are incredibly easy and can be left up to the auto-battle system, as the game has a weapon and armor synthesis system that allows you to make some incredibly overpowered weapons. Notice I only said weapons there. Armor doesn't upgrade nearly as drastically through the synthesis system. It's easy to absorb the damages enemies deal to you, and if you have the right upgrades unlocked for the Tractatus Demonstrum, you will recover most lost HP at the end of every battle. Bosses, on the other hand, hit like trucks, and healing and reviving in battle is surprisingly difficult. Some bosses as well require insanely specific strategies to win, so if you're not 100% ready, you are 100% going to lose. Times like this, I found myself grinding quite a bit, though I won't lie, I cheesed a lot of my grinding. You can drop the game to easy at any time from the central hub, and this will only affect how much mana you gain, but not how much experience you get. I found myself taking the hit to my mana often to cut down on grind tedium. Once I gained a few quick levels, I'd switch back to standard and do my best to overcome the bosses. Now I have no problem with difficulty spikes, and honestly, bosses should come with them. But in this game, they get a little extreme from the midpoint onward. Being able to switch to easy and keep the same amount of experience is a solution that I'm actually rather happy to see, but it really doesn't help with every boss. One boss in particular took me forever to figure out how to even damage them. And the final boss, I level capped a whole team of once ascended characters and still struggled to overcome it. Finding the right brigade of covens filled with the right group of characters with the right weapon types and good rapport, while still having enough reinforcement points to make use of them during a fight, is no easy feat, and is definitely a gameplay meta aimed at the most hardcore of dungeon crawler fans, which is strange considering how easy the normal enemies are. It's a little bit of a weird mishmash when it comes to difficulty, but overall, I really didn't mind too much. Honestly, the Disgaea art style should have been a dead giveaway of how mechanically hardcore this game was going to be. I apologize if this was hard to keep up with, and trust me, it was hard to find a way to even convey it over the course of a single review. Labyrinth of Refrain, despite the discrepancy between the enemies and bosses, was a pretty darn good dungeon crawler. Though I can't deny there was a few things that had me pretty annoyed along the way. Though it wasn't frequent, there was a few times throughout the game where it was incredibly unclear on how to progress. Some bosses can only be found by falling down the right hole and risking death or dismemberment to do it. At one point in the game, you will have to explore an unlit area. In unlit areas, your map can't display the walls to show you which ones are destructible and which ones aren't. In order to progress through one room like this, you'll need to manually check every single wall until you hopefully find one that can be broken. This is just bad design here. Little things like this can hold up gameplay for hours, and it's just beyond aggravating. It's always possible that I missed a vital hint to let me know what holes to fall in or where I should start checking walls, but to my recollection, no such hints existed. Some menus I have to complain to are also very tough to navigate, and it often seems like some information simply can't be found. Many times throughout the tutorials, the game tells you to refer to the software manual, which sadly is online only, and this is one game where a manual will really come in handy. I hit a couple glitches along the way too, but these are far more excusable. One glitch shifted my camera perspective too low, in which case simply hitting the duck button reset it. Another glitch had this witch petition displaying the wrong name. As you see, it shares the name with the item right below it. Once I purchased this petition, it didn't display as purchased either, a glitch that fixed itself simply by exiting and re-entering the menu. Since we're kind of already on the topic, let's talk about some technical aspects of the game and put this monster of a review to rest. First off, let me just give credit to the options menu here, which covers a lot of things we don't normally see on console games. Things like depth of field and bloom effect controls. The volume sliders are expansive enough, but I do find it a little funny that in a game that's otherwise translated very well, they chose small and large for the levels of volume. I'm not a huge fan of small or large volume myself, so I left most of it around the middle large range. You'll also notice in here they have options for Japanese and English audio and subtitles. The game isn't fully voiced, but pretty much everything outside of the dungeons is. I tried the game in both languages and both do a really great job, but I've really got to give it up this time. If you're a Puritan and only use Japanese voices without ever hearing what the actual competition is, you are missing out on an absolutely spectacular English voice cast.
Hey, what are you staring at?
Clueless witch. You could be naked for all I care, and I would still cut you in two.
Don't look! You can't look!
Luca, throw him out!
Very well. For Luca's sake, I'll
Get the hell out now!
Moving on, let me also just say that I love the 2D art in this game. From the characters to the enemies to the backgrounds, the characters have that specific Disgaea flair to it that I just find really attractive. The enemies pop right off the screen, and they've been drawn and colored in ways that I think does their excellent designs justice. The backgrounds for the visual novel sections look like beautiful storybooks. The only part of the visuals that doesn't hold up or feels a little cheap in comparison is the dungeons themselves. The dungeons don't exactly have much in terms of original design or any sort of spectacle in their amount of detail. These dungeons are the standard set of affairs for the genre and feel rather generic, but they get the job done. The soundtrack I thought was pretty good. Nothing actually blew me away, but a lot of the music was just really fun, and the sound design is in pretty much the same boat. At the start, I explained I tried the game on both PS4 and Switch, and while they functioned and looked nearly identical, I stuck with the PS4 version. The emphasis here is on the functioning nearly identical part. Simply put, I found the PS4's controller worked better for the game. When navigating dungeons, you move using the D-pad. Due to the design of the Joy-Con's D-pad, this was way more comfortable on the PS4. Granted, I could fix this by playing my Nintendo Switch with my Nintendo Switch Pro controller, which as a controller I absolutely love, but the PS4 controller still offered a bit more. With the right swipes on the PS4's touchpad, you have quick shortcuts to opening up certain menus and maps. Given the game's heavy reliance on its menus and maps, of course this one came as a no-brainer to me. The Switch version will still be absolutely fantastic, but ever so slightly more cumbersome as a result. That said, the Switch version is also portable, so take my preferences with a grain of salt. Overall, Labyrinth of Refrain is a great game with a few black marks and some absolutely crazy and unique design choices. I loved the story, and I loved the characters, and I loved the themes of unrequited love and jealousy. Although the battle system was a battlefield in and of itself, a minefield of things to navigate, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I'd love to see what they do with this going forward when they find ways to refine some of it just a little bit more. And that's all I'm going to say on Labyrinth of Refrain, Coven of Dusk, ladies and gentlemen. There's a lot more I could say, and I think I said a lot more than I intended to as well. If you found this video helpful, you know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe, share the video if you can. Links to socials are in the description. And as always, folks, thanks for watching.